Hello everyone, this is Shane with Allmax Software. We will be getting started here in a couple minutes. I'm going to wait for some more attendees to sign in here. Hello everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. With other attendees may be joining. Everyone will be receiving a recording of this webinar, so if people join late, that's fine. They will have a video later that they can reference. I want to welcome you to the first of our three-part series on exploring DataViews in Operator 10. This will also apply if you're using Nexus as well. I'm Shane in Technical Support. I'll be conducting this webinar today. Allmax Software wants to thank everyone for signing up and participating. We do have several attendees, so because of this, everyone has been muted. In the event you have questions, you'll notice in the application bar for our GoToWebinar, there is a chat window. You can type those questions in that chat window. Either myself or another tech will be available and we'll be able to answer those questions as we go along in the webinar. And I'll leave the webinar open for 5 to 15 minutes afterwards if there's additional questions you may have after we complete the webinar. Now keep in mind we are conducting this webinar online, so if any internet-related delays or interruptions occur, this will not affect the recording you will receive. Everyone will be receiving a recording of each session, so again, don't worry if you get pulled away from your computer or you miss anything during a section of the webinar. In our webinar DataViews series, in our first session, we are going to cover these items. So in this first session in our DataView webinar, we are going to cover the scope and purpose of DataViews, explaining what DataViews are, how they're best applied in the program. We'll be looking at the anatomy of a DataView, how a DataView is compiled, what parts of a DataView are critical, and how you can modify and change those different parts in a data view. Also, we'll be looking at the different types of data views you can create. So based on the type of data that you're trying to modify or view, you will be able to create different types of data views for those different data sets. We'll also look at methods for creating data views. We'll look at how you can apply data inside a data view. And then in the end, we'll be looking at how you can produce a data view as a report. So once you have created a data view and it's displaying values that you might want to generate in a report, you'll be able to do that in the data view section as well. So the first part of our webinar today is going to look at defining what is a data view. So what is really important to understand when you think of data views is how they are compiled. And a large component of that is happening behind the scenes. And I'm just going to touch on this briefly because it's really important to understanding how your columns and headers are organized inside a data view. If you ever get a chance to go to the Setup tab in your application ribbon, you'll notice there is a section for LP Setup. If I click on that, I can look at all the location parameters inside the program. What we have to understand for Operator 10 is that all the data is stored at the location parameter level. So for every data point you collect values for, it has a unique location and parameter combination. So depending on where the process is happening in the plant and based on the parameters that we're getting values for at that location, we can create a location parameter and we can start assigning numerical values or data to that location parameter. When you click on recent values in the location parameter window, you'll see that I can display all the data stored at any given location parameter, starting with the first time you ever entered data. So in my sample database, I have a year's worth of data compiled starting January 1st, 2017, and if I were to have started my database in 2010 or 2009, all that data is being stored inside your database and it's being assigned at the location parameter level. So as you go through, you can see that for this sample database I set up for our webinar, we have over 180 location parameters. Each of those location parameters are looking at different values and they may be performing different calculations based on the data that we need. You will note that there's a field in the location parameter that will highlight what entry type a location parameter is. This will be important as we begin to understand how data views are composed, we'll be able to determine what type of data view we want to create based on the location parameter entry type. So in this case, we have several different values for a location parameter. There will be a daily value, there can be just an hourly non-sum value, and then you can also create some hourly average, max, min, sum, and count values for a given location parameter inside the program. Once you understand the concept that all your data is being stored at the location parameter level in the program, then you'll be able to better understand how data views work. So we'll go back to our slide here in our sample database. No, I don't want to save that. So what a data view is essentially a collection of customizable rows and columns that organize your location parameters into a spreadsheet style page. And you can see I have an example of a data view over here to the right. So we have all of our columns up here at the top with header data, and then we have our rows which are assigned a date and or time value depending on what type of data we're collecting. Data views have really been created in our program to make the process of entering, viewing, importing, exporting, and producing your data fast and comprehensive. So instead of having to go to the back end of the program at the setup level like we did a few minutes ago and filter through each location parameter in your database, we can compile data views to display that data. That way we can then go into the data view and modify that data to our liking. Our philosophy behind why data views are so important to the program is simple. With the ability to manage and create data views that are unique to each user or groups of users' workflow, the process of managing data is controlled by the operator and it's not defined by the data set. So just to extrapolate on that concept, we can customize a data view around what your workflow is. So instead of creating a stock Excel template, for example, where everyone would have to navigate it and populate the different data values that are assigned to them, with a data view, we can create a data view with only the attached location parameters that are relevant for whatever process you're creating that data view for, whether it's for an operator to review data and calculations, or whether it's for a user that is going to be doing data entry. We can create different customized data views to make that process of performing your job easier. When we're looking at the anatomy of a data view, and we'll go ahead and pull a data view up here, and we can take a look at what a live data view looks like, and we'll be working mostly inside the data view section of the program here. One of the things to note is that our columns are defined by location parameters and header data. So just to reinforce the location parameter concept, for each column in this daily data view that I've brought up as an example, there's header data that's populated for each column. That header data can be modified by right-clicking on the header and editing the column header to display whatever text you would like. This can be used to make it more comprehensible for people to understand where data should be entered and how data should be entered. But what is really critical to understanding in the data view is that the columns, the data that's actually generated in these columns and data when it's modified, is always going to be attached to the location parameter that's added to the data view. So if I right-click again on this column header, you will see there's a location parameter that is being referenced. So this is where the data is actually being stored in the program. So this is our facility water sample data, and this is our location plant influent 1, and this is our parameter flow MGD. So regardless of whatever text I choose to populate in my header data, it's always going to reference this location parameter to store, edit, and modify any data that's made inside the data view. The text allows you to more easily identify the column and organize it inside a data view. It's also important to understand that rows are defined by the type of data views you create, and we are going to explore that today. There are essentially 3 different types of data views that you create inside Operator 10. Now, keep in mind, if you're only displaying daily values in a daily data view, then your rows are going to display a date and a day. So in this case, we have June 1st, Thursday, all the way through the end of the month. It's important to understand that as we create different data view types, you may also start to see time values attached to your day. And that's for hourly location parameters, and we'll be looking at that here shortly. So it's important to understand that the display type will change based on the data view type, and this can also be modified in properties, so we'll be able to explore how you can modify what date and time is displayed in these rows. The other really critical component to data views is our summary values. So you'll see at the bottom of the data view there are these default summary values for every column that we look at. These summary values can include the sum, the average, the max, and the minimum for the date range that we've selected, which is defined up here in the application ribbon, which we'll be going over here in a minute. We've selected a default full month date range from June 1st to June 30th. And as you can see, it will give us the sum value for each of these columns, as well as the average, the max, and the minimum. Now keep in mind you can add additional summary values at the bottom here, which could include count, so it can count the number of data points you have, as well as custom formulas, and we can even attach a geometric mean if you're looking at a value like fecal coliform where you would want to see that data. I do want to touch on the application ribbon here that is displayed in the data view section. So as you will have seen, when I opened my data view, I clicked on a hotspot that I had set up here in my slide. But if you wanted to navigate to the data view section from the application ribbon, you would go to your view tab and you would click data views, and then that would launch the data view section of the program. Once you're inside the data view section of the program, if you're not clicking on a hotspot to navigate to a specific data view, you can go to your open window from the application ribbon, and what that's going to do is that's going to give you a list of all the data views that you have saved inside your software program. And keep in mind, you can create multiple data views, and individual users may have specific data views that they've created, and of course you'll have operational data views that the entire plant uses. When you go through your list of available data views, you can search it just like you would the Allmax grid for other different pieces of information in the program. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our plant and fluent data view, and it'll also tell you the data view type, which is daily, and it'll tell you what facility is being referenced as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and then that's going to launch our data view. From the application ribbon, you also have the ability to create a new data view. So this is one method you would use for creating a data view, and I'm going to go into more detail on that later as we discuss the different data view types that you can create in Operator 10. You also have a save icon here. This is an important distinction to make. Anytime you change the properties of a data view, that would include the columns that you're displaying, the header data for the columns, or any specific properties that are unique to the data view. The program will prompt you to save those properties before you exit the data view, but you can also go up here and click the save icon, and it will save those changes as well. One thing that you do need to keep in mind with the actual data itself is when you type into these individual cells, our program automatically applies those changes. So if I change this value, the program is automatically going to apply that change to this particular column at this particular location parameter. And so I don't need to do the additional step of saving any changes because the program will automatically write that data to the database as I'm manipulating it inside the cell. We do that as a faster, more efficient way for our clients to modify their data and to make sure that if they do exit out of the data view, that they don't have to save any changes for any actual data that's modified inside the data view. So that's an important distinction to make. Now, also at the application ribbon, we have a properties menu here. So when you click on that icon, this will take you into the properties features of a data view. And this is where you can really go into the specific details of how you can customize and configure a data view for whatever specific form or function that you need it for. Now keep in mind, we'll be going into a lot of detail about all the various properties that are available in data views in part 2 and part 3 of our next webinar series. Also, one of the most important fields in the top application ribbon at the Home tab is your date range. So from here, you're able to quickly navigate through the program to display data inside a data view for different date ranges. So currently, I'm looking at June, but I can go back to May, and I can go back as far as I have data for. On a full month range basis. If I were to select from my drop down here in the date range section to display for a single day, then as I navigate, it's going to navigate by a single day and so forth. So if I were to select 7 days, again, it would navigate week by week as I click on my arrow. You also have the ability to display a full month, which is our default, and then you also have the ability to display an entire calendar year, as well as doing a custom view. So if I were to hit custom, you'll notice that a calendar pops up, and I can display a data view for as far back as I would like at whatever beginning point to whatever end point, and then it would compile that data view. Now, one thing that I'm sure many of you have ran into, as you start to compile data views with a lot more data, so if I'm going back a year or I'm displaying values for 12 months or 2 years, it will take the program a lot longer to produce that data view because it's compiling a lot more data to display for your review. Also, another important icon is the refresh icon. So sometimes when you make changes inside a data view, you may not immediately see those changes implemented, so it's important to always remember to refresh. This happens most often when you run calculations. So if you're running manual calculations inside the program and you've ran calculations for a given month or day or time frame, you often will have to refresh your data view in order for those calculated values to populate. And that does touch on our calculate icons. So as many of you know, we have several calculation options inside the program. If you click on your calculate icon, it's going to bring up your calculation screen. We did have a previous webinar series that went into more detail about custom formulas and calculations, but I will touch on this briefly, that you're able to select your start and end date for the period you want to run calculations for. And you also have the ability in the calculation window to run calculations for all the formulas for a selected facility. So in this case, it's going to be our water sample database. And then you also can, and I like this feature a lot, if I'm not getting correct or I'm getting incorrect values for a specific formula, I can test that formula by going to my formula list and just selecting a specific formula that I would like to run a calculation for. You also have the print option here from the main application ribbon in the data view, and that will allow you to print and generate your data view as a report. We have our intermittent, so this is a nice feature. If you have long rows, or I'm sorry, if you have several rows of blank values across your data view, if you hit intermittent, it will blank out those rows so they're not displayed. This is nice for BOD, TSS, or any data views where you would have sampling points where there's not data for several days in a row. It would, if I did not have data written for these other dates here, it would blank these entire rows out and only display the dates here that I had data for. When intermittent is turned on, it will be highlighted. You see that it's shadowed out here to indicate that intermittent is enabled. I have had clients call saying that the data view is not displaying data for specific dates, and most of the time that's because they have their intermittent enabled. If you click it again, it'll turn that off, turn that feature off. Also, you have the ability to resize all your columns to the default settings, or you can select specific columns and resize those. And I'm also going to show you some shortcuts for resizing your columns inside your data view, so you can modify these heights and widths just like you can in a spreadsheet program. You have the ability also in the application ribbon to switch between different data views. So if I were to go to open and open up another data view, so maybe I want to look at my Plan Effluent monthly data view, I can click on that. You'll see that that data view is now going to populate, and then I can use my switch icon to switch back and forth to any of the open data views that I'm working in. This is really nice if you're working through a couple processes and you've compiled those processes on different data views, and you just need to switch and cycle through them as you're reviewing and modifying your data. You also have the arrange icon, which I like if I'm looking and comparing multiple data views. I can tile these horizontally. I can then click on each of these and modify my date range. So if I click on this one up here, I can go back to May. If I click on this one down here, I can go forward a month and so forth. So all of those options are available when you arrange these and stack these on top of each other. And you have some more arrange options here depending on how you'd like to arrange your icons. And then of course you can close all once you've completed implementing your data changes or reviewing your data. You can close all of your data views that are open. The next tab that you'll come to is the Tools tab. So this is an important tab when you're looking at implementing some of the features in the data view. So if you were to copy and pasted a whole set of data inside the data view and you wanted to undo that, you could click undo and it would undo that and revert it back, or you could click redo. You can also copy, so if I were to highlight, I can copy and paste these cells just like I would inside a spreadsheet program, and then you can go over and you can paste these values wherever you'd like, and then it'll update the data set and it'll let you know that it's pasting those values. So keep in mind you can copy and paste inside our data view section of the program just like you do in a spreadsheet. Also, you have some data functions up here which are available, so you can add data from here. So if you click the Add Data button, it will allow you to implement adding data at a specific facility location parameter, as well as entering a date range and a value. This can be useful if you're running calculations on a data view and there's values that have not been populated for the location parameter where the calculations are coming from. Instead of having to close out your data view and open up another data view, you could go inside here and you could navigate to the location parameter with the missing values from your list. You could click OK, and then you could simply quickly write a data value for a given date range. You also have alpha code options here, so if you do have alpha code from your lab that you need to enter, you can compile a directory list. We do have several, as you can see from our list here, alpha codes that are all included with the program. Most of these are the pretty common ones, like too numerous to count and all that many labs use. You have the ability to add quick notes for each particular data cell. So for example, if there was a specific value that was quite unusual, or if something was occurring, you'll notice I have a quick note added here. I can understand there's a quick note because there's a little red tick right here in the upper right hand corner. If I click on that, it will start to display what my actual note is for my quick note. From the Tools tab, you can actually go in and view and edit any quick notes that you have set up in your particular data view. Another nice feature is you can also, if you were to highlight all of your cells inside your data view and you were to hit print, it would print off all the quick notes that are attached to that data view. It's a nice way to find out if you do have any notes attached to data values without having to search the entire data view, especially if you have a really long data view and you may not see all these little red indicators for that. You also have a find function where you can enter a data value and you can search a data view as well. And then we also have some fill blocks, which would fill your empty blocks, and we have some block summary. So block summary is really nice. So in addition to being able to compile your summary values down here at the bottom of the data view, you also have the ability to highlight any set of data points in a column. And when you do that, you'll notice at the very bottom in my taskbar, those values are changing. So my count value, my summary value, my average value, my max, min, geometric mean, and standard deviation. As I highlight more data points, the program's automatically doing that calculation for me down at the bottom in the taskbar. You can also click on Review Data, or I'm sorry, not Review Data. You can also do on Block Summary, and it'll essentially do the same thing. It will open up a block summary for you that will display the same values that I have highlighted. So if you wanted to display that in a pop-out, you can do that here. I find sometimes it's just quicker if I'm grabbing a certain set of values for quick calculations to look at the taskbar down here. And then when you click off of those, that will disappear, and you can do that for a couple values, or you can do that for an entire set of values. If you do it for an entire row, you'll see that you're getting the same summary values that you're getting down here by default in the summary section of the data view. We also have a read block feature, so if you want the program to read back the values that are populated for each cell, you can select that feature, hook up a pair of headphones, or if you have speakers, and the program will actually go through each cell and start reading that data back to you. That can be useful for transcribing data, or some people just enjoy it just to play around with it. It can be a little bit of fun if you've never done it before. You'll also notice from the Tools tab we have some important icons here, which is our Export tab. So this is where we can export our data as an Excel document, a comma-separated value document, or even as an XML file. We also have the ability to create electronic data views, which we'll go into a lot of detail in the third part of our webinar series. And we'll also be looking at exporting as well in our upcoming DataView webinar series. But I just want to highlight where those features are in the application ribbon so that you're aware that they're there. But that gives you an overview of the application ribbon inside the program. So the next thing I want to take a look at is I want to go ahead and look at the different types of data views that can be created inside the program. So there are 3 essential data view types that you will be creating in Operator10 or Synexus. And there is a daily values data view, which is if you're displaying location parameters that have a single value for a single day. You also have hourly value data views. So these are for your location parameters where you're going to have hourly values, and those are going to be displayed at different time points. So since we've looked a lot at a daily data view, I'm going to pull up an hourly data view here. And you can see it's been formatted a little bit differently. Again, all of this formatting is customizable, and we'll be exploring that in our second data view series. But one of the important things to keep in mind with hourly values is that these are timestamp values. So you can be grabbing data, in this case, every 4 hours. So essentially, I have, every 4 hours, I'm grabbing different values and writing those to the location parameter in the program. Again, we're writing these at the location parameter level. So I'm writing this at the plant effluent pH level. So that means I can take this location parameter and attach it to multiple data views. In this case, I've attached it to a pH hourly data view. I can also write hourly values every 5, 10, 15 minutes, and I can display those in a data view as well. Now again, just like we did from the application ribbon up here, I can change the display range for my hourly values. Keep in mind when you're displaying hourly values, you're not just displaying a single daily value, you're going to be displaying a lot more data over a shorter period of time. So that's why when you access the drop-down menu, we don't include the full month display, because generally for hourly values, most people are looking at those in a single day or a 7-day range. When you do click a different display type, since you are dealing with multiple data points, it can take the data view a little longer to render all those data points you want. But essentially, once you look at your hourly values, you're getting the same summary values down here at the bottom, and the program's attaching a timestamp to when that value was entered into the program. Just like you would modify data from any data view, you can change these values, and those changes will be applied immediately. If this location parameter was attached to 5 or 6 other data views, when you applied your data here, that would change on every data view that has this location parameter attached. And then the other type of data views that we're going to be looking at are summary data views as well. So the third type of data views that you can create is a summary value data view. And we'll go ahead and pull that up and take a look at that summary value data view. And this is giving us a summary value which allows us to display summarized monthly values in each row. So now instead of looking at a daily value or an hourly value, I'm looking at all the values for a given month for whatever attached location parameter column I have set up in this data view. Okay, in this case I'm looking at some biosolids and application data, but regardless, summary values work the same for any location parameters that you select. So this will allow you to display summarized monthly values for each row. Now keep in mind, so for example, we're looking at all of the values entered for January, all the values for February, and so forth for an entire calendar year, which is usually our default for summary values. But the nice thing about summary values is you can review your data quarterly or semi-annually as well to be able to review the entire composition of data for a particular location parameter. And you're also able to customize your calendar to display whatever date range you'd like to summarize values for. So in addition, in this particular summary data view, in addition to us summarizing all the values written for this particular 6-month data set, we also have our summaries down here which are compiling summary values for that entire time frame. So for this first half of the year, I'm getting a sum, an average, a max, and a min for all of these, for this location parameter for each month that has been selected in the data view. Now keep in mind that just like with the other summary values on your daily data view, you can modify these to also display different values, like instead of displaying the max and the min for the month, we can do a first of month or a continuous for both min and max, as well as displaying any user selected formula. So we could write a custom formula and use that as a summary value at the bottom of our data view, as well as we can display, again, geometric mean and count as well. So those are available in your summaries. What is important to understand with the summary data view is that we can modify in the data view, and I'm going to go back here to our full calendar year. We can modify whether the data view writes a summary value for each month, whether it writes an average value, or whether it's going to write a max or a min. And that, again, is defined in the Properties menu. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the Properties menu, but I do want you to understand how the summary value works, because we'll be covering this in more detail later. But when you go to the Column Setup tab inside your Properties menu, there is a yearly values type that I can select down here at the bottom. By modifying that yearly selected summary type, I can change the way the data is calculated for my summary data view. That's why these can be so useful, because I can change these from sum to average to max to min. I can even attach a specific formula to calculate a value for an entire month and then populate that in the summary data view. And then we also, again, have our min and max options down here if you're using a 7-day continuous or first of the month to calculate your max and min. So in this case, I'm going to just change it to an average, and I'm going to click OK, and it's going to take it a minute here to calculate all those values. But when it comes back, it's going to display us, instead of displaying the summary for each month, I'm now looking at the average value for each location parameter that was set up in the summary data view type. So the next thing I want to take a look at is how we can actually create data views. So initially we were able to, as you saw earlier from the application ribbon, we're able to open our data view window and we're able to look at a list of all the data views that we have set up inside the program. Now, from this data view window, you can also click add, and you can add a brand new data view. Also, you have the ability, we've created a shortcut in the application ribbon just to click the plus button to create a new data view. What is unique for 11.24, and if you're a 10.23 user, you will not have this ability, but in 11.24 we implemented quick create throughout the program to make certain features a lot faster, and one of the features was how you create data views. Initially, you would be greeted by a properties window in our older version, but in our newer version, in our quick create window, you're greeted by a list of all your location parameters. So if you recall, when we first started the webinar, I explained the location parameters and how important they are to storing your data. Well, what happens when you hit the plus button from the application ribbon is it displays a list of location parameters. And this is, again, the list of the location parameters that are set up in the program. The first thing you have to select when you hit the plus button is what type of data view we want to create. So again, we just discussed the different types of data views. There's our hourly, our daily, and our monthly summary data view types. If I select an hourly data view, it is only going to display location parameters that have an entry type of hourly, regardless if it's an hourly max, a min, an average, a non-sum. It does have to have an hourly entry type attached to it in order for it to be attached to an hourly data view. If I were to do that, I can highlight all of the values that I have for hourly, and I can click OK, and the program will immediately create that data view with all the location parameters I've just selected. One of the nice features that this comes in handy with is if you just want to quickly access your data and reference it without having to pull up an existing data view or without having to go into the process of modifying the properties of a data view, you can quickly click the plus button and you can select your data view type, and then you can select the specific location parameters you want to display in your data view and click OK, and it's going to create that data view on the fly so you can quickly reference data. I find this useful a lot for troubleshooting and calculations, but I also find this useful for comparing different months data-wise. So if I were to arrange these and tile these horizontally, and I'm going to close out, I'm going to change that. I'm going to close these out so you can see what I'm referencing here. And then I'm going to go back and arrange these right. So what it will do is it will stack these data views on top of each other. So I've essentially created two identical data views, as you can see from my data set here. But what I can do for one of the data views is I could go and display a previous date range. If I do that, then what I can do is I can compare my current date range with my previous date range if I just wanted to create two quick comparison data views. This can be really powerful from an operational standpoint. If you're having trouble or if there's a process that you really need to investigate further, you could stack two data views, and in each data view you can navigate to different date ranges. Based on the data view that you click on and highlight, it will change the date range from the application window. So this is a really good way to do a comparison for different data views. I'm going to close these out. Also keep in mind from the plus icon, you're also going to be able to select whether you want to create a daily data view as well as a monthly summary data view. If you were to do a daily data view, again, you could navigate through all your location parameters and find the actual location parameters you want to create for your data view. Now keep in mind, searching the grid's really useful in that. So if I was just looking for my plant efficiency data, I can see that all my efficiency processes are defined in one specific location. I can then go through my list of location parameters, highlight all of those, and then I can click OK, and it's going to compile a data view that is displaying all of my processes that I have set up inside my program, all the efficiency processes, and these are really all the internal calculations the program's doing for my plant efficiency, TVSS, and VOD, and so forth, and it will show my removal and all of that data. But really, creating a daily data view works for any data set points that you select from clicking the plus application icon and then selecting those particular location parameters inside the location parameter window. Also keep in mind, if you hold down the control button on your keyboard, you can select individual location parameters as well, so you can compile a data view based on those as well. That's one way, and a very fast way, to create a data view. Now the nice thing is so say for example I want to create a data view, so I've already have one open here. I close that out. So I've created this efficiency data view. So say I want to save it for later, and that way I can go in later and I can start modifying the properties of this data view, or maybe start eliminating some of these columns or adding additional columns. I can go up here and I can click the save icon, and it's going to allow me to save this data view, and I would just write in the name of it and write that down so I could bring it up later as a reference. So once you save a data view and click OK, it will now become a permanent part of your open data view list. So if I want to, anybody who has access to Operator 10 will be able to go in and pull up that daily data view for plant efficiency process. Another creation method that's really useful if you're taking an existing data view that's already been set up. So say for example you have a data view that's already been compiled in the program, you open it up, you're looking at it, and you want to make some changes to this data view, but you don't necessarily want to affect the main data view because other users use it, and they probably wouldn't appreciate if you started making a lot of changes to the properties of the data view. You can also select from the save icon below that, there's a drop down to save as. If you select save as, you can then rename or essentially copy this data view as a brand new data view by simply applying a different name to it. So this is going to be, in this case, a duplicate data view of efficiency process that I'm going to create so I can later go in and I can modify that. If I click OK, now what I've essentially done is I've copied the original data view into a brand new data view. That way, when I start making modifications and changes, it will not affect the original data view that I copied from. So that's a nice trick to duplicate an existing data view and then make any modifications to the data view that you would like, so you can specify it to your workflow or to whatever data values that you need to be entering or modifying data for. Another thing to keep in mind inside a data view is you'll notice Inside this data view specifically, you'll see all of these shields in the header data for the data view. These icons that appear in the header data for the columns, they're important icons, and they indicate different things. If you go to this little I information drop-down right above the rows of your date values, you'll have a list of icons, and this will tell you what each icon means inside a data view. In this case, since this is an internal efficiency process, and these are internal accum calculations that are being performed inside the program automatically protects these. So with a protected data view, you are not able to go in and modify data like you could in an unprotected cell. If I try to type, nothing will happen. Now, there is an option still to modify data for protected columns inside a data view. If you click on a given cell and you right-click, you'll see that you have some options that come up inside the data view. And a lot of these options we highlighted in the application ribbon under the Tools tab, but there's also a shortcut to a lot of these options by simply right-clicking on the cell and then selecting from the available options in the menu. Now, since this is a protected location parameter and a protected column, all of these options are not available to me, but one option that is to review data. If I click on review data, it's going to bring up a window of all the data for the particular date range that I've defined in the data view. So in this case, I'm looking at a full month, but if I were looking at a full calendar year, it would display all the data for the date range that I have inside the data view that I've defined. I can also click here and it will display all the data that's been written to that location parameter from the beginning of time. So this is something that you may want to be careful with when you're looking at hourly values that have a lot of historical data, since it can take a while for the program to compile a list of all those. But one of the nice features inside the data view is, even for protected data, it will allow you to review the data, and then there's an icon to unprotect that data. If you unprotect that data, a pop-out window will appear, and it will let you know that this data is now unprotected and can be edited until this window is closed. If I click OK, I can then go in and make any modifications to the data points that I want by highlighting them and then typing on my keyboard to make those modifications. Once I'm done making any modifications, I can click OK, and then if I hit refresh, you'll see that it populated the values that I made the modifications for. This is a nice feature because even for location parameters that aren't internal, if you protect a location parameter, it does indicate to the users who may go into a data view and try to modify the data that this isn't something that should be casually done. There's a reason this cell is protected, and so unless they know what they're doing, unless they make the conscious effort to review data, to unprotect the data, they're not going to be able just to casually go in and copy and paste or modify these values. This is really useful for calculated location parameters because it will prevent people from overriding calculated values. So that's something important to keep in mind when you create protected location parameters inside the program. So I want to go back to our Influent data view here, and I also want to explore some of the other icons, as I said. So another feature inside the program is we can define upper and lower limits. So you'll see those are indicated at the column header. If there are defined upper limits, you'll have an up arrow, you'll have a down arrow. If there's lower limits, if you exceed those limits, not only will the text appear in red, but it will also indicate whether it's exceeding the upper limit, and if the arrow is going down, that will let you know that it's exceeding the lower limit that's been set for that particular location parameter. You also will see that if both limits are defined, you'll have that up here at the top. And then if you have calculated values, you'll see a calendar icon in your column header, And then all of this will let you know you can lock data in the program. That is a feature available. If you want to lock all your historical data, you can do that. And then again, inside the actual cells, if you exceed the upper or lower limit, it'll let you know. We have our date note entered, which we discussed briefly earlier. So if I do have, as you can see here, if I have a quick note in here, I'll have a red tick here, and I'll be able to select that and display my quick note for that data point. Also, by right-clicking on a cell, if it's not protected, I have more options. So again, I can add data. So if I want to just add data this way, I showed you earlier why this might be useful. Otherwise, it's really just quicker to type into the cell, and type in the data that you want to add, other than right-clicking and then selecting Add Data. Also, your alpha code, again, we can bring up the list of the alpha code like we did from the application ribbon, and then you can copy and paste, delete. We can show our summary values just like we did previously, so we'll be able to pull that up. And then you also have some options to read your selected data, print selected data, and then we also have a calculator built in where you can, if you need to run some calculations, you can do that on the fly. And then, of course, review data brings up our review data window. The nice thing about this, other than when it's protected data that you can go in here and modify it, is that if I'm inside a particular data view for a full month and I want to go to a previous month without going to another data view, I can either define my date and time from the calendar, so I could go back to May, or I can select Display All Data and go back and look at my previous data points for a given month quickly inside the data view without having to navigate outside of that or creating another data view to review those data points. Now, on the introduction to the data view section, the last thing I do want to show you is attaching these data views. So again, when you create a data view, it's created inside the data view window, which is inside the data view section. Another nice feature that many of you take advantage of in the program is our hotspots. So what I can do is I can create hotspots based on our dashboard. So if I go to my data views here, you can see that I've created icons for each of the data views by creating hotspots in my dashboard. So by being able to create a hotspot, you can right-click and you can define the description of your hotspot. You can add your icon. You can choose the size of your icon. But more importantly, you can select what it's being linked to. And in this webinar, what's important to us is data views. So once I've created a data view and I've modified the properties and saved it, I can create hotspots to that data view. You can create multiple hotspots to the same data view if you want on different tabs in your dashboard, or if you have individual users that have separate dashboards, they can attach the same data view to their dashboard. Once you've done that, it then becomes easier to go in and review, or it becomes easier to launch your data views without having to actually go inside the data view section. When you double click on these, it will launch your data view, unless you already have your data view window open, in which case it will just reference that and create it right here. The last thing I'm going to show you in this webinar before we complete our first session here is our inverted data view types. So far you've seen a standard data view where the columns and rows have all been organized the same. We do have the ability inside the program, we'll be exploring a lot of this in detail in our next data view webinar, to invert our data view, and this is really nice for copying and pasting data, or if you have different time reference points for data entry. This can be visually more appealing, but it can also be easier just to navigate. So in this scenario, we've taken our total suspended solids BOD weekly data entry, so we've created a data entry data view, and I've defined, instead of defining all my location parameters up here in the columns, I've defined them essentially as rows where the date values would usually be, and then I've created all my date and time values at the top. So if I have like a laboratory information sheet and it's compiled like this, with a list of all my values here, I can copy and paste from that sheet, and I can highlight and copy and paste directly into a particular row of cells. So again, this just allows you more freedom to define how you view your data and how you apply that data inside the program. And that's going to be an inverted data view type, and again we selected that by going to the properties icon from the application ribbon. So that will conclude this DataView webinar. I know this was more of an introductory webinar on DataViews, but I want you to understand the fundamental basis of how DataViews are created, the different DataView types that you can create, and how it's referencing your location parameters inside the program. In our DataViews Part 2 webinar next Wednesday, we will be defining the properties of the DataView. So we'll be getting into how we define all those properties inside the DataView. We'll also be looking at how we can customize the layout and design, customizing your column headers as well as any color formatting and how your data is displayed. And then we'll be looking at setting your print and security properties. So when you want to produce reports with the DataView, we'll be looking at how you can modify your print properties to get the best looking reports. We'll also be looking at the security inside the DataView, whether it's protecting a location parameter like we did, like we saw in today's demonstration, or more importantly maybe whether it's protecting your actual DataView. So say you've spent a lot of time setting up a customized DataView, there is an option inside the program where you can protect that DataView so no changes can be made to the actual properties of the DataView, but people will still be able to actually edit, enter, and modify the actual data. They just won't be able to change the formatting and the design of the actual DataView. So that will conclude our first webinar on DataViews. My name is Shane with Almax Software. Again, I want to thank everybody, and Almax wants to thank everyone for signing up. We will be going into a great bit of detail in our next DataView webinar, and then also in our Part 3, we'll be exploring the calculations and the formulas that can be attached to DataViews and how the summary values can be reformatted. All right? I thank everyone, and that will conclude our webinar for today. Oh, and by the way, if you do have questions, you can type those into your chat window. I'm going to leave this open for 10 or 15 minutes so we can answer any questions you might have.